Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Been another incredible week for Scottish politics, for British politics and for global politics, and we've got an awful lot to get through today. But we're going to start slightly differently this week, because the biggest story in Scottish political this week was without a shadow of a doubt not the resignation of a has-been or never been, but it was this: Liberation Scotland going to the United Nations. Things are moving along, and it's something that we really need to discuss. And to do that, I am delighted, absolutely delighted, to welcome Alf Baird to our show, our podcast. Alf, welcome. Oh, there you are. Alf, welcome. Great to see you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm bursting with excitement and everything else. Tell me, Liberation, this is going to the UN Decolonization Unit. Treat me like a 5-year-old here. Most people do anyway, Alf. Can we explain to the people exactly what that means and exactly what it doesn't mean? Because an awful lot of hard work's gone into this. You must be delighted as well as excited.
Yeah, well, it's a big development. It's the culmination of quite a lot of a great deal of hard work on behalf of Salvo and Liberation, and the research teams involved. There's people from all walks of life and all abilities, people in human rights, people in law, people in other disciplines, academic as well as everyday life. So we brought all that knowledge together, but it's a culmination really of what's happened in the last 10 years, and what we might call the stasis of inactivity since the high point of the referendum in 2014, and really greater understanding of our work. And there's been a lot of what we might call anti-colonial literature has been produced over that period, yourself included, and other bloggers such as Gareth Wardell, and of course the late Ian Lawson as well, and Reverend Stu and others too. So there's been a lot of what we might call anti-colonial literature that enlightens the people, including the book that I did, Dún Hodden, which is, as far as I know, the only theoretical framework developed on Scotland's condition, or what I call the socio-political determinants of independence, decolonization. So that realization and the reflection on all that literature brings us to the conclusion that the political process in a territory that's suppressed in a number of ways, and which I would say, and others in Liberation would say, is colonized, is a need to understand what that means and the process required to overcome the oppression of colonization, or the many oppressions and colonial procedures that are imposed on a people, which are many and varied, include political, economic, cultural, and so on. The way this process is done. What is also enlightening this week is this, as you say, is major news, but the UK media has decided not to cover it. So that tells you how important it is.
Yeah, and I've got to do a shout out just now. Who'd have thought when Sarah Sayers walked up that wee passageway at Hampden Park to make her first and opening speech at the ALBA conference, and I remember I was there, as they say, that it would lead and culminate in this. So tell us, what exactly is the UN Decolonization Unit, Alf?
Well, the Decolonization Committee, C24 as it's called, is the UN's mechanism for dealing with countries that are seeking decolonization. So they're also defined as non-self-governing territories. So one of the requests we have of the UN is to identify and define Scotland as a non-self-governing territory. That's a territory where we don't have, as you know, the power to amend the treaty. We don't have the power to withdraw from the treaty. We're held by force in that sense, by English law in another term. So our condition is it has to be therefore defined first of all as a non-self-governing territory, and that's under Resolution 1541. There is the other resolution which the NGO in Geneva is concentrating on is 1514, which is the denial of expression of right to self-determination. And as we know, we've elected successive nationalist majorities, now 6 or more nationalist majorities in Scotland, under the mandate to hold another referendum on independence. And this mandate has always been denied by what the UN would call the administrative power, which is Westminster. So Scotland is effectively held by force. Now, the thing about the UN self-determination process is once you're defined as a non-self-governing territory, you therefore have an inalienable right to self-determination, as all peoples have. So that right has to be exercised, has to be allowed to be exercised. So this is the beginning of that process. It's the beginning of what the NGO in Geneva calls the decolonization process. Now, remember also that decolonization has a specific meaning in UN terminology. It means independence. And it's not something we've been told in Scotland. It's not part of the narrative that's pushed even by the National Party, the dominant National Party. So therefore, we have to begin to understand that independence means decolonization. It means that your decisions and rules and laws are no longer dictated by another power, in our case in Westminster, Whitehall, or the City of London even.
Yeah, and the process itself, we lodge a paper in Geneva. Does that then go to New York? Is there a debate in the General Council? What actually happens next, Alf?
Yeah, well, it's been the advance notice has been submitted. There is there's been quite a lot of documentation submitted with that advance notice that demonstrates Scotland's condition. And I would urge people to go onto liberation.scot website to read that information. It's all freely available. So therefore, that's the initial part of it. There is additional work undertaken by Liberation Scot and by the researchers involved in this, which describes the colonial markers, as it were, all the areas, aspects of colonialism Scotland is subject to. And this is historical as well as military aspects, but it's also contemporary, it's also about today, it's also about cultural aspects, linguistic aspects, about economic underdevelopment, about cultural oppression and so on. So there's a whole range of issues that are being attended to. That document will be submitted to the UN prior to its June seminar and other meetings that the C24 has. The intention then is that the UN C24 adopts a resolution. I should say that UN member state support is being actively canvassed at the moment by the NGO, because for this to be discussed on the floor of the UN committees and other bodies, then it needs to be done through the member states. We're in the fortunate position of about half the member states of the UN have decolonized themselves. So they know the situation. This is an unusual one in the sense that Scotland's always been paraded as an equal partner of a union. But this is the evidence we've submitted to the UN suggests that this is an illusion. But it was also an illusion given to many other colonized territories who were told they were British identity and they were part of something greater, and their own cultures and their own ethnicity and everything was subordinate to that. And that's the racist element involved in colonialism. Many colonized peoples were handed a worthless treaty, and the Scots were no different. So we're going into this process that will take a period of time, but essentially that period in the summer when we expect that the Scotland's case will be heard more in detail, may then lead on to a further resolution, we hope, within the UN General Assembly itself later in the year.
Right, so we're talking like, can I ask one basic question? Being the UN, can the UK veto any discussion on this?
Apparently not, according to the NGO advice we have from Geneva. This is a matter that the committees of the UN will consider and under their own resolutions. So we expect that they will hear that. The UK we have to say, is under a lot of pressure from the UN and other international agencies at the moment because of the absence of implementation of human rights within the UK across a whole range of different areas. And we have human rights experts within Liberation Organisation who are championing that. And this is also about the expression of human rights in terms of self-determination of a people. And we have to remember within the UK context, the Scots in that sense are an oppressed ethnic group. And this is what the evidence we have provided confirms, that we are still, and we are a minority group within the UK context, although this is forgotten. It's not even considered by the National Party, who prioritise ethnic groups from all over the world, but they forget the Scots, the ethnic Scots who have been oppressed for 300 years. Culture has been destroyed, our economy has been destroyed, dismantled and exploited, and is still being exploited as we go into the renewables revolution, as we've going from the oil and gas revolution, which we missed out on massively. So economically, economic exploitation is a fundamental part of this, as well as the cultural oppression and political control. So Scotland has to understand its condition, and hopefully as well within this debate, if it was properly discussed in the public domain, which is not at the moment because the UK media have obviously blacklisted the news and have more interesting things to talk about than Scotland's liberation. So it needs to be talked about more within the public domain in Scotland, so that people understand their condition.
Yeah, well, that's why we're doing this. And folks, those of you who are watching, you should share this as much as you can with as many people as you can. I'm not saying that for the grandiose of Prism, but for the sake of the cause, because the mainstream are not going to do it. Perfidious Albion, they ignore international law as it is, as we've seen over Palestine. What concerns me, and I'm sure concerns a lot of our viewers, is will they just ignore this? Can they just ignore this?
Yeah, well, I don't think they can, because remember that independence also has an international dimension. What the SNP has depended on is domestic law until now. And that's obviously, that door has been shut in their face repeatedly. The UN and the world's, the UN, let's remember, the UN was created to end the powers of the imperial powers and the control that they had over hundreds of territories around the world, and still do in many cases. So we're in the death throes of English imperialism, which has gone internationally to a large extent. Only 10 remaining non-self-governing territories, mostly small islands. But we're now into what Professor Michael Hector described as the internal colonies of the UK. And England as the UK. And that's part of the work that Sarah Salyers and others have done, revealing that the UK is really just a constitutional hoax. It was England annexing Scotland, as well as previously Wales and Ireland, as the Celtic periphery. The treaty itself is fairly meaningless because it's constant. It was violated even before it was the ink was dry. And it's been violated ever since. It really is a worthless. And Sarah explains very well that there is only one crown as far as Scotland law is concerned. Although there are two crowns, there's the Scottish crown and the English crown. The Scottish crown still exists through the claim of right and other aspects of Scotland's historical constitution. But it's not respected. So we have English law imposed in Scotland pretty much the same way as Ireland and Wales were subjected to annexation. So that's the argument that's being made, which is contrary to what the UN was told in 1960, that the UK was a partnership of equals through consent, which was never the case. Even back in 1707, the union was not consensual by any means. It was a corrupt arrangement which was imposed on Scots, followed by military occupation and vast demographic displacement. So Scotland has been subjected to all these aspects of colonial procedures ever since. And this is where Scots have to understand. But you have to repember as well that post-colonial theory tells us that colonialism is based on psychology. So people have this colonial mindset, which eventually, for many of them, that unlike us, you and I, Roddy, and many others that support independence, liberation, we've overcome that colonial mindset, but it still exists in many of our fellow Scots who will deny oppression and will favour domination by another people and culture and suppress their own culture. And people have written about this as Stockholm Syndrome and other aspects, but essentially post-colonial writers regard it as simply the colonial mindset which leads to that behaviour. Yeah,
I mean, I found senior SNP people, elected ones, who deny there's any kind of colonisation of Scotland. They buy into the British talk of it. Now, you did briefly talk about timescales. You hope later this year that it will possibly go to a resolution to go to the General Council or General Assembly. And with the wind at our back and everything, what's the quickest we could hope that this could have some kind of resolution, and then we'll talk about what that could be and what that means. But how quick and how long could it take?
It's difficult to say that, Roddy. But what I would say is the process, as the NGO in Geneva has said, has begun. And this is the important aspect today. Scotland's decolonisation or independence process really begins now, this week. So we know the process that we expect to materialise over the next six to 9 months. And we hope that will take place. Thereafter, we can see from other non-self-governing territories that the UN has a range of different mechanisms it can bring to bear on administering powers to push them a little bit further along the road than they might want to go. And that includes perhaps having UN visiting missions and other aspects, but also the UN perhaps becoming more involved in any self-determination process itself, which includes, for example, if any further referendum was to occur, as the UN has been able to do in many different other areas of the world, such as New Caledonia, it might be able to administer a referendum process that is a fairer referendum process, fairer to the people seeking self-determination. The people and groups seeking self-determination. And that is the Scots in our case. We also have to bear in mind that Ireland has a treaty with the UK, and Northern Ireland is part of that in terms of the Belfast Agreement, which determines that a referendum should occur or could occur within every 7 years. And also has a condition there that only people who can vote in that referendum are people born in Northern Ireland. Now, that is already a UK international arrangement brokered by the US at the time as well, and other UN states. So what international pressure can bring to bear is very important here. But essentially, you're talking about the self-determination of the Scottish people at the end of the day, and we have to be careful how we define the Scottish people, bearing in mind that our demographic has been altered incredibly by what I would call colonial procedures, what the post-colonial theory describes even as banishment of the natives. We have suffered that enormously with between 3 and 4 million Scots, one of the biggest outmigrations in Europe's history for a country of this size. There's Scots all over the world, and there was reasons for that, not always good reasons, and basically a result of policies of the UK state. And in migration of a people mainly from one country as well. So we have a population mix that is signifaurly anti-independence, as we know from 2014.
Absolutely.
But to give the people a fair go at liberation, they have to prioritise in that sense the people who are seeking self-determination, which is the Scottish people.
Yeah, and what we're saying is we're talking here maybe a couple of years at least. It's not weeks or days. It's going to take a couple of years, yeah?
Yeah, but I think in the meantime, what should be happening is people's awareness should grow.
Absolutely.
As people become aware that, they will be thinking, what is this colonisation? Because people have been told about classical colonialism, which is what even the universities talk about, and people... human rights and all the rest of it. They talk about classical colonialism, which is slavery and plantation of hundreds of years ago. But colonialism is today. It's now, it's contemporary. Scotland is massively exploited. Its cultures and languages are being destroyed. Its people are being decimated and replaced. Our birth rate is the lowest on record, and there is a number of reasons for that, which relate back to UK and devolved, or what I would call colonial policy. So we are still in the midst of intense pressure. And remember that the only two options here with self-determination, liberation, is either a people are liberated, become independent, or their culture perishes. And Scotland's culture and its people are in the process of perishing. We're being removed, even the census tells us we're being removed, and our cultures are being destroyed. So in that sense, liberation is always an urgent matter. It's an urgent matter. And people should also use opportunities at elections as well. And we have an election next year, and I know that you and your colleagues and other people and other parties and groups have got strategies for next year. And yes, every opportunity should be taken. The UN is just one option, but every opportunity should be taken to liberate the people and to liberate us from what it is, oppression.
Yep, but you're right, it's one part of the jigsaw. And I know Sarah's answered this and told me yes, but what the people watching should understand, the outcome of this, the outcome is that we're recognised, that we're as a colony and the UN supports us, but we're still going to, as you pointed out, we need electoral events to back it up as another part of the jigsaw. Getting ourselves out into the world and getting support. These are all parts of that jigsaw, am I right, Alf?
Yes, I think what we're doing here with Liberation Scotland and Salvo is, and the UN's initiative, is to push the information internationally, so that all these countries will know that Scotland's condition is not one of consent. It's not one where we have an equal union where we can withdraw or we can change the arrangement within the UK. We cannot. We're prevented from any political acts to do that, or any constitutional acts to do that. So essentially, we are therefore a non-self-governing territory in the full sense of the meaning. And our resources are enormously exploited. Our land is bought and sold by anybody and nobody for whatever purpose. And we have no control over our land, our seas, our destiny. Our destiny is out of our hands. We are just, in colonial terms, we are bystanders. We are bystanders and out of the game. So we want to get into the game internationally, as Winnie Ewing, the great Winnie Ewing, used to say, stop the world, we want to get on. That's what we're saying to the world community out there. Stop the world. Remember the Scots. We were just, we were just used as colonial assets and all the rest of it, just like anybody else, and probably one of the first to do so, maybe after Ireland. So, and we have to remember there's an independence movement still very much in Ireland, very much in Wales, and very much in Scotland. That tells the international community that this isn't going away. People are here. It tells the international community that, we are here waiting to get on that global bus, which is the UN at the moment. So that's where we have to be. And that support, I expect and hope, will be forthcoming.
Yeah, absolutely, here too. And as the great man himself said, the dream will never die, and you've reiterated it, Alf, it will never die. It'll only stop once we're independent. So for all the unions that watch, and I know a lot of you do watch it, we ain't going away. This is it's sooner or later. It's when and how, not if. Alf, I'm afraid the clock's beating us, but can I just ask you one last question? What is the best possible outcome to come from going to the UN decolonisation, and what could be the worst outcome?
I think the best outcome will be that the UN regards our petition and advance notice with sincerity and care, and what we've provided with them is an enormous body of evidence that shows that Scotland is in a colonial situation. So I don't see the UN coming up with any other option but to accept Scotland's case as a non-self-governing territory. It will have to undertake enormous constitutional political gymnastics to come to an alternative view. But yes, I think on the downside, our adversaries will use this to beat us and to call us radicals. And I await the response of the National Party, which still lives, it still breathes. But I have to say,
Yes.
most of its members, most of its active members, have left and gone to different parties, including Liberation Scotland, which has more than 17,000 members, and Salvo as well.
Yeah.
So most of the
Yeah.
active people in Scotland, in Scottish nationalism, have moved to do something else. Away from the SNP, but the SNP,
Yeah.
their response to this will be important. Do they support this initiative to decolonise and make Scotland independent, or do they oppose it? Are they neutral on this, as they were in the Keating's case? So it will be important what that response is. Personally, I don't see a downside for the Scottish independence movement. I think any process towards liberation is positive. There will be people, as I say, on the unionist or colonialist side that will not accept Scotland's colonial status, but that is the reality of the colonial mindset we deal with every day as well, amongst particularly our elites. So we have a challenge to face, but we're facing the challenge.
Correct. And as Alf has late said, about our enemies will want to call us radical. I wear it as a badge of honour. I am a radical Scottish independentista. Alf, thank you so much for your time. This is something that actually merits a midweek special Prism. I think where you and I could talk for an hour and a half or so on this, and we'll get that organised. But in the meantime, for coming in at such short notice and helping us this week, we appreciate it. And we know that the ISP have already signed up to the Salvo Liberation, are doing their bit. I would plead with the SNP, with Swinney and whoever, Ash or Kenny, whoever wins the Alba leadership, to get behind this initiative. We all need to be pulling in the same direction. It's part of the jigsaw, folks, and it is a jigsaw with several pieces, and we've got to get them all together. So please do that. Alf, thank you so much for being our guest today. Well, that was great. Well done, Alf. Thank you for that again. Alan, if I could start with you. You are quite heavily involved with it. You're a member of Salvo and quite heavily involved in the organisation. What did you make of what Alf had to say, and this going to the UN declaration?
I think it's something that the movement have been waiting a long time to hear. That we are taking this international. We are reclaiming what is ours, and that is the independence of our nation. We are no longer sitting like the SNP on our hands, bowing the knee to Westminster. I mean, I ask people to look at the 24 committee and look at the members, because the membership of this changes quite often. But who are not members of this committee are the United Kingdom and the United States of America.
Good.
The vast majority of the members of this committee are people who have gone through colonisation themselves. So that is good for us. Now, this may take some time, but maybe not as long as what we think. Because if we can prove at an election that the people of Scotland want their independence, with this going through to the United Nations as well, we have more chance of nations recognising our right for us to take unilateral declaration of independence. And this movement had been waiting for that for a long, long time. And I say to the political parties, in particular the SNP and Alba, get on board with this, back it. Get all your members out on the street supporting this. The ISP are supporting it, Indie for Indy are supporting it. So let's get this whole movement united behind this, because this is an important stage in our campaign.
Yeah, as I said in my chat with Alf, Eva, this is part of the jigsaw. It's one part of the jigsaw. We shouldn't get massively carried away. And I know some people do. They seem to think we'll go to the UN will declare. And as Sarah's tried to tell them, and Big Ian before them, we also need the electoral event, as Alan's talking about. But this certainly makes campaigning a lot easier should this go through and be successful, which I am sure it will be. It will make it, it gives absolute credibility, and it destroys one of the planks that the unionists use against us.
I thought that was absolutely fantastic. I could listen to Alf for hours on end. What I particularly like is he's relatable, he's likeable, but there's a steely strength there as well, and it's very much like the iron fist inside the velvet glove, and that is exactly what Scotland needs today. What is particularly admirable about this approach is that it's an extension of the Scottish principles of the Declaration of Arbroath and the claim of right, and the fact that when Scots have a monarch, the monarch is the king or the queen of Scots, not of Scotland. And what matters is the power of the people. And this is a popular movement which will hit the headlines, it will grab the headlines, and it'll ensnare your imagination. And you can just visualise that popular movement swelling from hundreds to thousands, where it is already, to hundreds of thousands, to us hitting the streets as a united movement demanding that we have the recognition of the international community, which our forebears going back for hundreds of years have been able to get. So this is one very, very hugely important strand in an enormous bow. The technical aspects of this also capture the imagination, because what this is about is establishing that Scotland is what is called a non-self-governing territory. And there are a number of aspects to this, that we are geographically separate from the administering power, which clearly we are. We possess distinct ethnic, cultural or linguistic characteristics, which we do, and we lack full measure of self-government, which we do. There we are, we've satisfied the three criteria. That's what we need to do, is to persuade the international community that we've satisfied those. We all know we have, the whole world knows we have, in terms of ethnicity or culture. You know, you can laugh about it, but we've got our haggis, we've got our bagpipes, we've got our tartan, we've got our history, we've got our language. We're geographically distinct, and clearly we're controlled from Westminster because we only have devolution. So the icing on the cake will be, as Alan says, that popular movement galvanising itself into action and ensuring that our political parties and people of no party stand as one next year in the Holyrood election with an overwhelming absolute majority, a supermajority, for those who support independence and who support the notion of declaring our independence on the international stage. The SNP need to sit up and take notice. Alba already have. The ISP have bought into this. Indie for Indie have bought into this. All we need to do is to drag John Swinney and those around him along with us. And there's plenty of foot soldiers left in the SNP who are able to persuade John Swinney and Keith Brown and Mike Russell and Nicola Sturgeon too. She's not really departed the stage. She's still there and influential. These people need to waken up, look around them and see what the people are doing that the politicians thus far in the main have failed to do. And let's have that supermajority next year. And we're motoring in the international community when we've got that behind us too.
Absolutely. One of the things that Alf said, Phil, was that we either have liberation, independence, however you want to call it, liberation or extinction. And it is really that dramatic, because we're slowly but surely, with the intake of people from south of the border selling up their hovels and coming up and buying a castle in Scotland, our culture has been wiped out. So it is more important than ever that we get moving. And it is, the unity is the key to back up the liberation at the UN and us at the ballot box.
Yeah, and we can see this happening in front of our very eyes. It's been happening over the last, well, longer than that for Wales, but because that's the marker I would use. But this is a great opportunity here. This is time to get up, stand up, sign up for your rights. Join liberation.scot to state you believe in an independent Scotland, and join salvo.scot if you're prepared to do more about gaining that freedom. I went online again to see my emails already registered at liberation.scot, which I'm very pleased about. I'm only sorry that since I left politics, and politics cost me a great deal, that I've not been in a position to do more. So hats off to Liberation Scot, everyone behind it, and Salvo for achieving this marvellous initiative. So let's all do it, let's all sign up, let's all join Liberation. It's critical that our voices are heard. Remember, in one sense, this strategy is not a new one. The Declaration of Arbroath, which we're also proud of, 1320, so an over 700 years old, which plays the biggest aspect in this whole issue, is a letter to the Pope from the barons and freeholders of Scotland, asking for the recognition of the Scots' independence and to acknowledge Robert the Bruce as our lawful king. So we go and we fight for our freedom. We gain it as the people. But how's it measured? What is the metric? It's recognition around the world that we are a sovereign people, a sovereign state. We are the Scots, and we're back. And it's been talked about a few times, but key to the argument, this is not a union of equals, and in fact it never has been. The Act of Union, apart from being more about salt and sectarianism, was basically torn up and binned after it was put into place, and we were effectively subsumed into England's Parliament. So when we say we were bought and sold for English gold in the case of the Lord's Convention, at least that's the case, and they sold us out. So this union of equals is a lie. The union is actually a union of two countries, Scotland and England, as well as the so-called Principality of Wales and the province of Northern Ireland. But in fact, Wales, Roddy, as you pointed out earlier, was actually formally subsumed into England by laws enacted in the early 1600s. So not even a principality anymore. I hope they have a case, because who doesn't feel for the Welsh? But that's where we're headed. We lost millions abroad, the clearances, etc., and the biggest number of immigrants into Scotland by far are English, and that's what's happened to Wales. I went to the Hay and Wye Book Festival on the borders on the River Wye. It's so Anglified, and Wales is so Anglified. It's not even a principality anymore. It's just part of England. And the New England and the New English in Scotland, of course, voted massively for the Union in 2014. 80% of them voting for the Union. So we need to slow down the loss of Scots and restrict the immigration of the English in larger numbers, and act quickly to secure our country and cultural freedom, or it's going to be eroded the same way Wales has been. You get watered down, and we just have to face up to the fact. It's not racist. It's not anything other than stating the facts. This is what's happened. This is how it works, and that's what Alf's warned us about, and we should take heed.
We actually should. One of the great things he said is the fact, in our own country, Lloyd, we are bystanders, and it's so true. We have control over so little, and we have to stand back and watch, for example, nuclear weapons being put in the Clyde. If they decide to put up nuclear power stations, which we don't need or want, we will have to accept it. If they decide to go to war with Russia, which is looking more and more likely every day when I listen to Starmer and Lamy, we will have to go. We are bystanders in our own nation.
Yes, we are. And unfortunately, those that have the political clout in our country are not standing up and making the point that we are bystanders. Unfortunately, what we've got at the moment is we have a Scottish government who effectively is trailing along behind the British government in their support of these mad concepts of putting boots on the ground in the Ukraine, for instance. But, you know, let's not get too negative about this. What Alf had to say, the work that Salvo and Liberation have done of raising again an issue which was on the cards in the 70s and the 80s. Indeed, there was a committee within the Scottish National Party that dealt directly with the United Nations, but somehow, at a particular point, it was decided not to go down that route. And I would suggest that the reason it didn't go down that route was its potential for success was too worrying for some people. I think at the moment, what we have to understand is that simply by stating that we are taking our case to the United Nations is internationalising something which we should have done a long while back. It's not enough for us to see ourselves in the international stage as rugby supporters and football supporters and little else. The fact of the matter is the erosion of our culture is happening on a day and daily basis. And until we make the effort that's begun by Salvo and Liberation, to actually challenge the concept that we are an equal partner, we are in a union of respect. All of the things that we know and our people know are not true. These things have to change, and the only way they're going to change that is by us talking to each other and talking outside to the outside world. This initiative does all of those things. There's something exciting about this for ordinary people in this country, because what we're saying is we are part of the world and we're not depending on our political representatives to make that statement. And to some degree, the responsibility is now on us to actually force the issue with the politicians. And as we've been saying for ages and ages, you know, the SNP either has to get out the way or get on the bus. That's just the straightforward facts of it. And hopefully, this could be the precursor to a constitutional convention in the approach to the 2026 election. Because when something like this is moving, your leading political organisation cannot stand aside and pretend that it's got nothing to do with it, or you will find yourself in the same circumstances the Catalans and the Basques did when they made their approach, or were about to make their approach to the United Nations. And it was a while ago now, admittedly, but at the time, the main Catalan nationalist party, which was called Convergencia and Unió, submitted its own paper to the United Nations claiming that they were not a colony. And then that was followed by the PNV, the Basque National Party in the Basque Country, submitting the same letter saying that they did not consider themselves to be a colony. And effectively, the campaign's legs were cut out from underneath it by the so-called nationalist politicians. We have to beware that the same thing doesn't happen this time round, because back in the 70s and the 80s, when the SNP had contact with the United Nations, there was a certain academic lawyer called Neil McCormick who put the kibosh on the whole thing on the basis of he was an expert, he knew better, and as a result of that, the whole contact between the Scottish National Party and the United Nations was ended. And that, my friends, has been a big, big mistake.
Yeah. One of the things, Alan, that we also spoke about, and he references it quite a lot, Alf, is the New Caledonia. Now that's happening just now, folks, for those who don't know. It's down in the South Seas. It's a French colony. And they had a referendum a while back, but there was the French were allowed to vote in it, and so they failed. But the rule is, one of the things that I have been called a blood and soil, because I said at the time that I didn't think that everyone should vote. I think the franchise in 2014 was wrong. I've made that declaration often, Alan, that it was the wrong one. There was too many people, for example, part-time soldiers, part-time students, people with holiday homes that were allowed to vote because it's like a local authority election. They shouldn't. But part of the UN decolonization unit, they've set up in New Caledonia that it's only the indigenous that will be allowed to vote, and only people over a certain time sphere who have lived in New Caledonia who will be allowed to vote. Now, we need that in Scotland. We know that 53% of those in 2014 of Scots born voted yes. So the majority is there with the indigenous. It's one thing that could come from this if the UN take over the referendum, and I would then back a referendum. Till that time, I will never back a referendum. Are you similar? You're on mute.
Sorry. The UK used that campaign against us because what was their biggest attack on us? All these foreigners in your country will be getting deported. All these Europeans will be getting deported because we'll no longer be in the European Union. It wasn't Scotland that actually deported them. It was the UK Parliament. It was Westminster that deported them after Brexit. But it should be Scots born that votes on our independence. People are welcome to come into our country. But when we go into your country, we respect your rules, your laws, and your heritage. We're only asking for the exact same thing. Let us decide who controls us and which way we want our country run. Because at this present time, we aren't being run by the Scottish Parliament. Because Westminster has a right to veto anything that is put forward from the Scottish Parliament, whether it is devolved or reserved. The last say is within the Westminster Parliament, and they can veto everything. Even the head of the civil service aren't employed by the Scottish Parliament. They're appointed by the Westminster Parliament. Everything that comes on shows that we are colonised. We have to stand up and make sure our country is run by Scots for Scots.
Absolutely. I mean, go back to this, we can't be accused of being blood and soil because, again, Alf pointed out quite rightly on the Good Friday Agreement that the franchise, when there's to be a border poll over Northern Ireland, can only be those who were born in Northern Ireland. It seems actually fair. I've lived in Catalonia for 10 years now. This is my 10th year here. I decided to leave on the 19th of October 2014, folks. Join the dots. And the reason I'll never be able to vote in a general election, in an independence referendum, and I am relaxed with that. That is the correct decision. I've chosen to come and live in their country. Why should I get to decide how they're governed? And it should be no different. If in Northern Ireland you have to be a Northern Ireland born person to vote in their border poll, surely it should be the same in Scotland. Eva, are you in mute? Why is everyone going into mute?
My dogs are barking, so it might
All
be
right.
helpful for somebody else to answer that. I'll go and answer my door and silence the dogs.
Well, as Phil suggested, a method which is by a shotgun, which I think a bit extreme. So Eva's a way to answer the door. Perhaps you can answer my question, Mr. Boswell. That'll get you lots of lovely hate mail.
Come on, everybody likes a wee bit of jocularity. So on the
franchise.
Absolutely, it works. We know that. We knew it was the wrong franchise. We know that only local elections have that kind of franchise, and that's quite right, because if you're voting as a visiting student or someone who's just arrived, it's your taxes, your local taxes that you're paying, your local authority, how your bins are emptied, when your bins are emptied, all that kind of stuff. That's absolutely fine to have some say over this type of issue. But when it's a constitutional issue, it can only be the people of Scotland, and this is the norm. This is not racist. This is not anything other than the norm. But when it comes to issues about constitution and the future and defining of your country, then it's only those who either have been born there or have earned the right to live there permanently. You know, and you're talking about 10 years is not an unreasonable period of time. So for all these individuals who have turned up, and you're welcome, as Alan pointed out, Scotland, we want to build a Scotland that looks after the Scots, everyone who lives and works in Scotland. That's what we want, a fairer, more democratic society that cares. But to get that, the last thing we need are people who don't buy into that principle. They're welcome to stay if they choose to stay, but we make the decision. And how we make that decision is becoming clearer and clearer. How do we take our independence? As we said, we the people will win our freedom. But as we know, it needs to be recognised by the world at large and the institutions we have. Thankfully, the UN still has some principles, and C24 is a shining example of this. So the UN decolonisation process, initiated by Liberation Scotland just a few days ago, has to be supported. Go to Liberation Scotland, as we say, sign up. It costs you nothing, and yet it's a massive step. I feel it's a massive step on the road to independence. To be part of this momentous change in Scotland's history that we ourselves can make, unchain the unicorn and sign up, make your voice heard. So check the Liberation site and watch the Salvo special video titled UN Decolonisation Process and a presentation by Indie Scot News, and check out the Liberation Scot library. You know, we should all read more and use more libraries, folks, and this library is a belter. So this site opens with this wonderful, wonderful statement. On the 7th of March, on behalf of more than 17,000 members of Liberation Scotland, Justice Portu International notified the Secretary-General of the United Nations in New York and the Chair and Bureau of the United Nations Special Committee on Decolonisation, C24, of the establishment of Scotland's peaceful liberation movement. And what's wonderful, you watch that video, you listen to Alf, and, you know, regardless of whether this is the trigger that starts the unification process and the combining of parties in Scotland to the cause of independence and unifies the people or not, for me it's an important step on the way, and we need to use everything we have at our disposal to beat this British state that would have us on our knees. So let's increase that 17,000 number in Liberation Scotland membership to numbers that cannot be ignored, and it's so easy to do. Just put your name to it. Nothing more is required. No credit card, no payment unless you choose to support the cause, and so go on. What's stopping you guys? Let's all do this and make it happen.
Yeah, well done. Good promotion there, and well done. And also, you should be supporting the people who are supporting this, like ISP, who support this, Indie for Indie, who support this, Alapa, who I believe support this. These are the people you should be supporting. Eva, one of your great things has always been about having this constitutional convention. You have been banging the drum about that for years now. Could this be the catalyst that we've all been hoping and wanting and looking for to bring the people together and the movement together?
It certainly should be. A constitutional convention properly constituted, with full participation from civic as well as political society, would also capture the imagination, and it would capture the attention of the international community too, because it would bolster and it would support this application to the UN. What a constitutional convention properly created in Scotland would do is it would debate the circumstances that justify and support the application to the UN, because the application says that the UK government has actively obstructed Scotland's right to self-determination in contravention of a UN General Assembly Resolution 1514, which states all peoples have the right to self-determination, and the subjection of peoples to alien subjugation, domination and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights. That one line, that one phrase is the foundation, the explanation, the justification, the remit of a constitutional convention to discuss that Scotland is subjugated by an alien nation, that we are dominated by an alien nation, and we are exploited by an alien nation. All I have to say is one word: Grangemouth. And that encaptures it all. It encapsulates exactly why we do what we do. So a constitutional convention would focus on the very aspects, the very principles that found the application to the UN. And what is more precious than a citizen of a free country or a country desiring to be free to want to participate in the wider world? Winnie Ewing said it way back when: stop the world, Scotland wants to get on. We're still saying it. Well, here's hoping that this time next year, our feet are firmly planted back on the world stage again. And John Swinney today could lift the phone to Alf Baird, Sarah Salyers, and say, how about it? We're 100% behind you, foursquare behind you. I'm drawing up the list for the Constitutional Convention. Who do you want to be on it? And get the job underway now.
Absolutely, a great idea. Because we know, for example, as part of that culture they take away from us, we don't have any control over our broadcasting or our media, Lloyd. This is it. We're part of the Scottish media, the independent Scottish media, Prism, programmes like us. We are a very small minority, because you're not reading anything about this in the Record or the Express or the Herald or anything. They're keeping it under wraps because this threatens the union, and we can't have that. So it's important to understand our culture has been taken away from us. We need that constitutional convention. We need unity in 26, and everyone does need to get behind this declaration by liberation.
Absolutely, Roddy. And as Alf himself said, this is urgent. Every day it is urgent that we regain our independence. And as Eva just said, if you have any concept that we are not a colony, simply examine everything related directly to the Grangemouth situation. Now, nothing, absolutely nothing is clearer than if you are an oil-producing country, you have one oil refinery, that oil refinery is closed at the behest of the national government of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and that will then be transferred to mainland Europe, and a subsidised new refinery will be built there. That is the absolute crystallisation of colonialism, where our natural resources, which should be going to the benefit of the people of this country, not just the immediate money that comes from the oil and the refining of the oil, but the years and years and years of education that was required to build the refinery, to service and make the refinery function, the effect into our education system, the simple, straightforward effect of knowing that there are long-term jobs, well-paid, highly skilled jobs in a particular area, and they've been completely taken away from us with no replacement whatsoever. That's one of the great crystallizations of colonisation. But how about this? And this is, I think, is going to be a major part of us presenting the case that we need to make both to our own people and to the United Nations. The creation of the free ports and special economic zones without any reference whatsoever to the people of this country, effectively removing the democratic rights of the people within very specific areas, which just happen to be the areas where the largest amount of finance can be generated. Now, if that is not colonial exploitation, explain to me what is. For instance, only a couple of months ago, the president of Mali, having been a French colony, subsidized France with its gold and its uranium and all of its other natural resources, they turned around and they said, no more gold, no more uranium to France. And they went from being a country that had a deficit to now being a country which in under 2 months has actually put itself in a surplus by preventing the colonial oppressor taking their natural resources. For me, what this means is an opportunity to reopen the debate, for us to be able to say to our people, do you think it's right that our natural resources, which could be going to pay a proper pension to our senior citizens, our natural resources, which could be used to pay for much cheaper electricity bills for all of our people, when we're in a situation where we've had 26 years of devolution and the statistics on poverty are exactly the same or worse than they were in 1999. Now, if anybody can say to me that having devolution has in some way mitigated the colonial nature of our circumstances, then I'm sorry, you're wrong. If 1 in 4 of our children were in poverty in 1999 and 1 in 4 of our children are in poverty in 2025, then it's not working. It's not working to our benefit. The fact of the matter is, this is a possibility, a real possibility for a refocus by all the elements of the independence movement, and for us to raise the bar intellectually, because this is what this means. It means, instead of going, oh, we don't really want to talk about that, we don't want to be unpleasant to Westminster, we don't want to be unpleasant to the English, take a lesson out the Irish book. Take a lesson from the Irish. They have a clear understanding, both north and south, of who the enemy is. We don't. We've been put in a corner where we think to bite back, to use certain language. It's not right. It's like yesterday, Anne-Marie Ward put out a thing about how she's sick to the back teeth of hearing our politicians complain about the fact that we talk to each other, the clutching of pearls. We've had too much of this, and we've got a population who will bow to that. When John Swinney says, you must not talk to me like that. When England says, you must not talk to me like that. It's time for us to say, well, I'm sorry. Talking to you is one thing. Taking and removing those natural resources that would allow us to give a better standard of living and quality of life to the people of our country, that's the crime, not using nasty words.
If I could actually just sum up, you sit here, folks, when you watch our show, and you hear us saying we need to eradicate poverty. We need to get, a decent pension. We need to get our children 1 in 4 of our children out of poverty. We need better schools. That's what we talk about. And what are the British talking about? They're talking about increasing defence spending, about going to war with Russia, about supporting a regime in Palestine that's killing children and mothers. That's the difference. We're a different people, we're a different culture, we need to do things differently. Look, the clock's beginning to beat us. But you've just reminded me on Lloyd. Could I just, folks, anyone living in the Burnt Island area, next Sunday, the 23rd of March, the Burnt Island Sands Hotel, from 1:30 to 3:30, there's a Freeport meeting to oppose the Freeport. So anyone you can get there, get up there and get to it. It's something you'll be attending, Alan.
Yes, I'll be in attendance at that meeting. This is an opportunity of the people around Burnt Island and wider areas to come into a meeting. Let's fill that room and let's send out a clear message that Scotland is not for sale. Because that's what these free ports and SEZ areas are doing. They're selling off our land, our assets. while our children are starving and our pensioners are freezing. So come on, people. It's not a lot to ask. Get to the meeting on next Sunday and make sure our voices are heard very clearly. Scotland is not for sale.
No, it is not. Well, as I say, the clock's beating us, but there's a few things I want to cover. Now, we prioritise every week what we should talk about, what's the biggest news points. And this to us was the biggest news point. Not some despot who resigned this week, along with a whole crowd of other SNP people who have done nothing to achieve our cause. So we didn't cover it. We're not going to cover it. It's yesterday's news. It's for wrapping the chips in as far as I'm concerned. She's gone. And there's a lot of them gone with her. It's what's going to replace them that matters. So what we've got to do is have unity. We need a constitutional convention. I'm sick of saying it. We get behind liberation. And to do that, folks, and we're going to have a special show next week, the people from Indie for Indie and the people you see in front of you just now on the screen and behind the screen and the techies have developed an app called Campaigner. It will assist Liberation and Salvo, and it will assist the Independents for Independence, ISP and any other independence party. We have developed an advanced technical product which is at the moment going through its final testing at the app and with Apple, and we'll be doing next week with Android. And in the next couple of weeks, we will be taking it on the road to show you how this can help canvass, how this can help get people signed up to Liberation, how it can get people signed up onto the electoral register, how we'll get to know where our voters are and our support are, and more importantly, where our foes are. Because what happened in July 24 was that 750,000 independents supporting people stayed at home. It's our job, my job, your job, everyone's job to motivate them and get them back out. Liberation have fired a big shot across the bows of the British establishment. It's up to the rest of us to join in the fight. And until we see you again, you and yours, take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.